Welcome to PSD to HTML5 and CSS3. This video is called Layout, Styling the Header. In this video, we're going to be primarily focusing on using CSS to style this section of our website. In the previous video, we styled the navigation menu up here, and we got started a little bit on the header, but in this video, we're going to make this section look just like this section right here. So let's get started. Open up your code editor and navigate to your index.html file. You can see here that we wrapped part of the navigation menu, this section right here, in a div with the class of container and clearfix because we had that collapsing issue. So the clearfix solved that issue, and the container is what made the navigation menu centered, and we were able to keep that black bar because we styled the header, this whole section, by giving it the background of black and then having the container center in the middle of the browser. So we were able to have this full width black bar but keep the content in the center. We're going to do the same thing with the header right here. We're going to keep this section blue, but we're going to wrap this content right here in a div with the class of container, and it's going to pop right in the middle here like we did in this section. So let's go to our HTML, and since we gave the ID of hero the background of blue, we don't want to wrap this in container because then the blue is going to cut off. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, just so you can see what we're not wanting to do. So I'm just going to do this real quickly. Give that the class of container, and there it is. So that doesn't look good. It's the blue cuts off right here, and the black just spews down over on the sides, and it looks really bad. So that's not what we want to do. We want to put that div with the class of container in between this div. So let's do it here. Whoops. Let's indent this in. Save, go back. There it is. So we're already a huge step ahead by centering that right there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, let me just space this out a bit here so we can see what's happening inside. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our CSS, and we're going to start styling up the layout of the header. So we're going to continue here. We already did header and logo and hero, but now what we're going to do is we're going to give the text inside of here, see how it's gray, it doesn't look good, and it's not actually what's in the original style. So this is just flat black. So let's make this black. So inside of hero, color is going to be the text color, and it's going to be black. There it is. Looks good. Now let's move on to hero title. If you remember in our HTML, hero title is everything that's in the left column. So the titles and the call to action buttons. So we're going to start styling hero title. It's going to, actually, we need to find the width. So let's find out how wide this section is going to be. Let's make it this wide. So that is 520 pixels wide. So let's do that. Width 520 pixels. And it's going to need some padding because we need this section up here. We need this padding right here. In our current site, there's no padding. So padding, 60 pixels, 0. As we've covered previously, by doing this is the shorthand for top and bottom and left and right. So 60 pixels of padding on the top and the bottom and 0 pixels of padding on the left and the right. So let's see what that looks like. That's getting there. It's in the right position. Looks good. Okay, so now we need to bring this up here. We need to bring that big computer up on the right. Kind of like what we did in the navigation here. We had the logo, and then we floated that left, and we floated this right so that it would pop up to the right. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's float the hero title left. Okay, almost. And we're probably going to make, let's see here. Uno momento. Okay, so what we're going to do is, okay, all right, I'm back. That looks all right. It's pretty close. It's a little off here, but the way that we're going to fix that is by selecting our hero image and we're going to float that to the right. So that should bring it right to the edge. There we go. So here we have the same issue. The parent container collapsed, so now the blue is gone. It's still there, but it's 0 pixels tall. We want it to be able to recognize that it has 2 children in here. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add clear fix. I specifically left it out this time so that you can see this issue come up again and how this will fix it. So add clear fix class to the container, and from now on we're going to automatically, when we create a container class, also give it the class of clear fix. So now this will fix it. Looks good. So if you look on this end design, you can see the image is kind of overflows at the bottom here. It kind of goes outside of the container and it has a little bit of padding up there. So we're going to want to do that. So let's achieve that with some CSS. We're going to give the hero image some margin, 10 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, negative 30 pixels on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Negative 30 pixels is going to pull up the margin. So this actually won't have, say, for example, 30 pixels like this. It'll have negative 30 pixels, which will pull up anything below it 30 pixels. So if I refresh, there it is. So now if we look, that is dead on. That's bang on. That's exactly what we want. The only thing now is we have these buttons and they're not quite what we're looking for. So let's actually style those buttons. We're going to skip down a little bit here because we essentially already styled up our header or hero section. Let's go down to our global styles and let's make these buttons look like real buttons. There's going to be a lot of styles involved, so instead of just putting it in global styles, let's actually give it an entire section. So copy that comment, give some space here, paste it, and change this to buttons. So this is where we're going to style our buttons. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the button class. There's going to be a lot of styles involved here. So just follow along. There's going to be a lot of CSS and CSS3 wizardry in here. Let's just dive right into it. The background of the buttons are the dark blue. So I'm going to copy that. Here's our button, background dark blue. Border, we're going to give it a border of 1 pixel. And I don't know if we have this color up there. We don't. So let's add a new color. This is going to be, it's going to be a slightly darker blue border. And let's add some color here. The text color will be white. Cursor is going to be a pointer because we want it to show the pointer. Right here, this is the cursor, the little arrow, and a pointer is the hand. You can see it on when you use it on the internet. So here you go. When you hover, you want the pointer, not the cursor, which is this. So let's go back here. Cursor, pointer, display, inline block. Okay, inline block is a little bit of one of those funny things. I have a site pulled up here. Inline block is kind of a hybrid between inline elements and block elements. It behaves kind of like both. I'm not going to totally explain everything about inline block, but we're going to be using it throughout the site. And it poses some issues with browsers like Internet Explorer 7. So the way that we can make it work is there's an inline block IE7 hack that you can use to make it recognize the element as inline block. So it's essentially this right here. You can read into inline block if you wish, but we won't be diving into that in this course. So I'm just going to put a comment here. IE7 inline block fix. And that is zoom 1 and asterisk display inline. Okay. Moving on. Margin 0 on all sides. Outline none. We don't want any outline. Padding 10 on the bottom. 20 pixels on the left and right, and 11 pixels on the bottom. Sorry, 10 pixels on the top. Position relative. Text align center. We want the text in the middle or the center of the button. Text decoration none. We're doing this because it's a link and links have underlines, as you can see, and we don't want that. Okay, now this is where we're going to start getting into some CSS3 fun. Box shadow for WebKit. This is, I'm not going to dive into this, how this works. But this is going to allow us to have some box shadow, like a little shadow behind the box, the button. And I'm using CSS3 and RGBA as opposed to just color codes. I'm not going to dive into how this works. You can just follow along, copy it, and if you're really interested in how this works, perhaps I'll do some more videos or more tutorials later on how this works, or you can just do a little research on CSS3 and you'll find out quickly how this works. So we're going to cover Mozilla browsers as well. And you don't even necessarily need to know, actually let's just copy this. You don't necessarily even need to know how this works. You could just know that it works. And if you want a box shadow and you just play around with these numbers to give you different colors and different shades and different opacities of the shadow, if you want it on the inside of the button or you want it on the outside of the button, how big the shadows will be, how far they'll be from on the x-axis and on the y-axis. You could play around with all these numbers and just experiment, and that's the best way to learn, just experimenting and making mistakes and just having fun with it. So you don't necessarily need to know why it works, but knowing that it works, and it's still going to produce a great result. So just have fun with it. Okay. And now let's space this in here so we can see it a little better. I'm leaving spaces here just for readability. It doesn't affect the style. It's just so it's not all clumped up in one big chunk so we can see it a little better. Some more CSS here. CSS3. Okay, transition. Let's grab the background color. It's going to transition at 0.15 seconds. And it's going to ease in, out. Copy that. You might see a pattern here. We're going to be grabbing the, transition. The same prefixes here. We have WebKit transition, Moz transition. We have another one here that we haven't used yet. O transition, which it grabs Opera browsers. And transition. Space these in so we can see a little bit better. There we go. We can even add some comments here just to say what it is. Fancy box shadows and CSS3 animations. Okay. Let's just change that to transitions actually. So let's save this and see what happened. So there we go. We're starting to, you can see all the buttons have the same styles. They're starting to look a lot better. There's no hover effects yet, and there's no active effects yet, like when you click on it, like this. So we're gonna start doing that by going back to our CSS. Let's add more. Button, hover, the hover pseudo class. So now when we hover over any element with a class of button, the color, we're going to say white. It stays white right now when we hover, but in some browsers, it might not. It might hover to a default browser style like blue or purple or something weird, and it will make the button it'll look off, and we won't want that. So we're going to say keep it at white. And the background color, you can do background color or you can just do background. But since we are selecting background color here in the transition, we're going to say background color just to be consistent so we can avoid some errors and we can have a really cool effect here. So another color we haven't introduced, it's just a darker blue. Now if we hover over the button, you can see a really subtle hover effect, and it just fades in ever so gently. There we go. It looks good. Now what we're going to want to do is give the active class, because when we click down on the button, we want it to do something as well. So let's do some more CSS3 here. WebKit box shadow. We've already been introduced to this. And what we're going to do is, let's do it like this. Okay, and inset. Have that on the inside of the button. Let's copy the style. Same thing, Moz, box shadow. Whoops. And box shadow. Space it in. You don't need to do this. It's just so you can read it. You can have this any way that you want, but I like doing this because clearly it's a lot easier to read. Okay, so that looks good. And now let's actually make sure that the color stays white when you click down. Okay, let's have a little look. Active. There you go. You can see the subtle little shadow on the top there when you click. It just makes it a lot more user-friendly to click on a button. You get some feedback that you're on the button and that you're clicking on the button. It's really great. The reason why we use CSS3 for this is typically what you do before is you create the styles in Photoshop and you'd slice up images of the default button, the hovered button, and the active button, and you'd use CSS to swap those images out, and it's it's fine to do it that way. And if you have some really crazy buttons that have images or certain things on them, that's still a good way to go. But CSS3 makes it a lot easier to just style it in CSS as opposed to saving images and using up bandwidth by saving more images and downloading images. You could just use CSS and it's a few lines of code and it renders quickly in the browser and it uses hardly any space or bandwidth. So let's actually move on to the large button, because we have these buttons, they all look the same, but they're actually different sizes. And some don't even have backgrounds at all. So let's make the large button. So let's add, let's access or select the button large class and give it some padding. There's 20 pixels on the top and bottom and 30 pixels on the left and right. You can see that in the Photoshop mockup here. You can use the marquee tool to roughly see, whoops, how tall and how wide the padding is. So I just know off by heart what it is. So it's 20 and 30, and let's have a little look. So we're getting there. The font size is not the same though. So let's change the font size to 24 pixels. And the font weight to 200, so quite light. Now let's look. There we go. That looks a lot more like it. Okay. So let's move on to the secondary button, this one right here. And let's actually put a comma there, and we can select more because they're going to have the same styles. So the secondary button and the secondary button's hover is going to be the same, and the button secondary active. All three of these are going to have the same styles as opposed to these which have different styles. So that's going to be background, none, border, none, WebKit box shadow, none, Moz box shadow, none, and box shadow, none. Just make sure I'm doing this right here. Okay, that's good. And let's space this in. Okay, now let's just double check that. It's getting there. We're not quite done. We need to add some styles to make it larger. We need the font size to be larger. Just losing my notes here. Okay, so let's actually make that font size larger. Let's find out what it is. Let's go to our mockup. Use the text or the type tool. Click on that, and that is 20 pixels. So let's go back. And here we go. Let's just select button secondary. Font size 20 pixels. Let's have a look at that. That's looking pretty good. We still need to do a couple things. So let's go here. Button secondary hover. We're going to access this alone. And text decoration, underline. We're going to underline it when you hover over the secondary button. And button secondary active. We want the position to be relative because we want it to move down 1 pixel from the top when you hover. So in order to move it by using top, right, bottom, or left, any amount of pixels, it needs to be positioned, relative or absolutely. So here we're gonna, when you click down on the link, it's going to move down 1 pixel. There we go. You can see that. You got the underline, and when you click, it goes down. So it just kind of gives a little more feedback than just a link. It pops down like that. Okay, so up next, we have, we're going to have to move this down. It looks like this has got some space there, and we want to do that. So let's let me just double check here. Just want to make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, call to action. Okay, so we're going to need to move this whole section down. This whole section is the call to action section. We can see in our index.html, we have call to action. So we can select that and move it down. So let's go back to our layout. See, in our CSS, we now have a lot of stuff in here, and it can get really confusing. So it's easy to find our layout section because we have these clearly defined comments, and now we can continue working without any headache. All right, so call to action. The ID of call to action, the margin, 40 on the top and bottom, 0 on the left and right. Refresh, there it is. So let's have a look here. Few little subtle differences here. The button doesn't seem to be quite the same height. We can fix that really easily. We'll just go to our large button here, and let's just give it a bit more padding. Let's say, I don't know, 22 pixels on the top and bottom. And there you go. Nailed it. Bang on. So quick review. We styled our header section right here. And in the next video, we're going to be moving on to the content.